Well, welcome back, and we're continuing our look at what it means to plant and to pastor safe or safer churches that are healthy and safe for their members. And today's theme is to do with accountability. It's about plurality and interdependence. Well, this theme arises out of recognizing that God Himself gives us the gifts that we need in order to have healthy and safe churches. One of the most important gifts He gives us is each other. How does He do that? Well, He does that in two ways. One, He gives us each other in the church. We are brought into a family. And so in 1 Corinthians 12, we're told that the church is like a body with members, with individual body parts that are connected together. And the last thing you want is for any of those body parts to get isolated from each other, or it ends up like the lost sheep in Luke 15, distressed and alone and in danger. So one part of that is the local church and the idea that we have members of the church, but also that we have plural leadership. And so in Acts 20, you find Paul talking to the Ephesian elders in the plural. You find that when you look at Titus and 1 Timothy, when Paul talks about appointing leaders, appointing elders and deacons in the church, again, it's plural. You're not meant to have a one-man band. You're meant to have that sense of people working together for the good of the gospel and for the well-being of the church. So we're given each other in the local church, but also local churches are given to each other as well. That each church is connected in with the wider body of Christ. So in 1 Corinthians 14, when Paul is dealing with some tricky issues, around about verse 33 to 36, he's dealing with some tricky issues about order in the church, about the use of gifts, and about the role of men and women in the life of the church. And what does Paul come back to? He comes back to this. You're not on your own. You're not the only ones that have heard from God. The gospel didn't start with you. Look at what the practice is and the approach is across the churches. Be connected with others. Be in fellowship with others. What I believe this means is that local churches, I think rightly should be independent or autonomous in the sense that they determine what happens in the local church. They're responsible for church discipline. They're responsible for appointing leaders within the local church. In that respect, I'm not into great denominational structures and bureaucracy and parachurch organisations. I believe the local church is significant. It's important. It's the building block where things happen from. But there should be this interconnectedness. And we do see examples of that even in Acts. So, for example, Barnabas will go and get Paul and bring him to help him in Antioch. And when there are questions and issues in the churches around the world, they will go back and get advice. And so there is that council that meets in Jerusalem. And it seems when you look at that, what happens, it's the elders in Jerusalem. It's not the apostles dictating out, but it seems to be that there's a little bit of going back to those with experience and wisdom and getting the advice from another church to church. So we're interconnected, interdependent rather than purely independent, if you like. Now, it's important to say at this point that we can believe all of those things in theory, and we can even have the formal structures in place. But that doesn't mean to say that it will actually work in practice. Let me give you an example, first of all, in terms of interdependence between churches. I think it's possible to be part of a denomination and have all of those structures in place and yet be completely isolated. I think this has particularly happened when we've had these very large churches and they start their own little micro networks. They become so big that no one can tell them what to do. And so they will pass on their instructions to the churches that have become dependent on them. And those churches, because they're dependent, not interdependent, aren't able to challenge back. And no one actually questions the leadership of that big church. Because if they are challenged, then they've got the power, they've got that deterrent, that threat, if you like, that nuclear option to say, well, we will quit, we will go our own way, we will leave, and you'll be on your own. We will take our people and our money and all our resources and our recognisable name with us. And so no one can actually challenge or hold to account. So that's the challenge within church to church relationships. And the challenge within a local church is that we can have in place elders, leaders in plural, but either because they're afraid of a dominant leader or because they kind of social norms dictate that it would be impolite to challenge, or even because of sycophancy. And dare I say something more innocent, you get this thing called groupthink, where it's people with a similar outlook, a similar way of approaching things, getting together, that they share the same blind spots, and so there's no challenge. All of those things can happen. I'm sorry, I'm struggling with a cold today. This is not the prettiest of videos, is it? A bit of a streaming cold, but I want to get this out. I might replace it with a smoother version at some point without the sneezing and sniffling. So you have these leaders, and there's more than one of them, but they end up thinking and feeling and perceiving things in the same way. And I think this is where things went wrong with the British government in recent weeks. I'm speaking in the middle of a bit of a political and economic crisis. What happened? Well, Liz Truss became Prime Minister. And then instead of kind of dropping people into a big tent, bringing Rishi Sunak and his people into her cabinet, finding the best people to fill the jobs, she basically appointed her cabinet, punishing those that she considered to have opposed her, even though that was their legitimate democratic right, rewarding loyalists, and basically putting those that she considered her friends into the top positions. The Chancellor was a long-term friend of hers. Her Deputy Prime Minister, again, is one of her friends. And they share completely the same outlook. There's no diversity within the team. And that meant that there was nobody to challenge Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng when they put together the mini budget and to say, hold on, before you put that out, have you considered? As if there had been other people on the team and robust debate within the cabinet, then they might have been able to avoid some of the mistakes and pitfalls and might have actually managed to get more of their original plan through than they did in the end. So it's worth thinking about your church leadership. Now, it's important that there's a unity of beliefs. Nobody should be joining your leadership team that isn't signed up to your core doctrines, your statement of belief, the things that you believe are essential. There should be a shared vision as well. There's no point trying to bring people in who are saying, I think the church should be going in a completely different direction. However, I think it's good when you've got different temperaments, different ways of approaching things, and some diversity in terms of how people engage with questions and issues. That creates a context, and if there is healthy friendship and brotherly and sisterly love amongst leaders. By the way, I personally believe that elders are male, but the leadership of a church should be male and female. The elders are not the only leaders in the church. For example, you will have deacons and you will have ministry leaders and people like that. Now, once you have got that team together, if there is that love and care for each other, a genuine sense of being family together, you can even disagree at times because you love each other and because you've got the same aim of caring for the church, looking out for one another, avoiding mistakes and pitfalls, and ensuring that the church is pursuing its mission and its vision. Be aware of the pitfalls, look out for groupthink, ensure that you have people that are genuinely able and willing to challenge and correct and to question as well as to support and encourage. And then make sure that the church culture allows it as well. And that means thinking about your own culture as individual leaders. And sometimes it's hard. I know that people have come back to me and said, we've learned over time that we could challenge you, we could disagree with you, but at first we thought we couldn't. And the reason why was that my way of approaching things is that I like to get things ordered, I put them down on paper, I will often think through the different scenarios, and I will present something. And I will say, here are a couple of options, I'll let you know what my preference is, but I'm aware that it might not be that one that goes through. And then I invite people back to challenge me, to question it, to show me where I've got it wrong, because I think that's important. But initially, people didn't always hear that, and because they were used to people coming with a fait accompli, often also in writing. They thought, well, this is it. They've decided what should happen. So I had to be very careful in saying to people, please, I want to hear you challenge me. You might need to do that as a leader as well. But also, those of you that are challenged, it's important that you model how you challenge, that you disagree well, that you show that you are being constructive and loving, and that we look after each other. We care about each other as we have discussions, as we hold each other to account, and as we make decisions and discern together. And the important thing is this, that even when we're disagreeing, even when we're challenging, even when we're questioning, everyone else should have the sense that we are doing that because we care about the gospel, we care about Jesus and his glory, we care about the local church, and we care about one another. So I would encourage you to think about how you relate to other churches outside of your own and how you relate to one another in your church. Do you have the processes and the people, but also the culture that enables that genuine plurality and interdependence?